prepared, never scared. Can't quit. One of the best to do it on the mic like Moses. Prepared, never scared. Can't quit. One of the best to do it. And my words born.
Yo, I turn my phone off and let my dome roam. The human CP.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good to be back here with you again tonight. Welcome to another evening with Blockchain Braun. As you come into the video or come into the door, if you would, please smash up the like buttons, like, and share with a friend. Tonight, we're going to talk about what's the deal. What's the deal between Russia and China? Between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping? What's the deal? Also, we'll get a little bit into the federal funds rate change that we had this week. I'm pretty sure that you guys want to hear about that. I'm not going to take a lot of time on that, or a long time on that, but I will address it some. And then really that should finalize the video tonight. We'll talk about Recession 2 a little bit, because that's been on my mind and kind of where we are as it pertains to that. So we'll go ahead and get into the video. So tonight, what I'll deal with first is the federal funds rate change, since that's kind of recent and it's very important to a lot of people. It's important to me too as well. But I just kind of want to shed some light on what that means to us as the consumer. And I think you really want to bring things down in the layman's terms to see what that means to us. So whenever there's an interest rate change, or they say we're going to have an interest rate change, or we're going to cut rates, what that means is they're going to have a federal funds rate change, which really, when you have a federal funds rate change, that is in reference to the banks. And what that means is, in case you guys did not know, the banks borrow money from one another to do operations. A lot of times this borrowing takes place overnight, doing overnight operations. So there'll be money to do transactions and to perform business the next day. So whenever there's a federal funds rate change, that means that there's been they say we're doing a federal funds rate cut, then the interest rate is cut between the banks as far as them borrowing from one another. So what they had was they had a 0.50 change as far as in the federal funds rate, or what they would call a 50 basis point change. And so what that means is the banks are going to have a decrease in the rate to do transactions. Is that good? Yes. How does that pertain to us? Well, this is the thing about the federal funds rate change and the interest rate change. It does trickle down to us, and it does get over to us eventually. And what I mean by that is this. Anytime there's a change where there's been a rate cut, as far as the banks interacting with one another, it does trickle over to us some eventually. So if you cut the rates as far as in the banks dealing with one another, then what the banks can then in return do, because economics is all cyclical. So what the banks can then do is turn around to their customers and say, hey, well, since we've had a cut, then we can cut rates to our customers too as well, because we have some leverage to work with there. So eventually that does get over to the regular retail customer as far as the rate change is concerned, or to the regular people like us. So the rate change will eventually get over to us to where it will matter. And that is definitely a good thing. Now, as far as what particular effect does it have on inflation? Well, this is the thing, guys. Does it have an effect on inflation? Really, not that much, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is this. Two of the main factors as far as inflation is the constant printing of money, which we're not stopping that. Government spending, which I doubt we're stopping that. And the value of our money is still a trajectory going down. The dollar doesn't have the power that it used to have. It's because we're losing the value of our money. And we have people that are countries or the powers that be that are getting away from the dollar and trying to do some other things economically. And so what we're running into now that we have not run into before, and I talked about this the last video, is we have a lot of different things happening. We have a very important election coming up. We have inflation that's not where it needs to be. Then add to that we have countries and we have regimes that are leaving the dollar and starting their own currency in the BRICs. A lot of people don't think the BRICs will work. There are too many intangibles. They're making up every excuse as to why it's not going to work. And I don't think we're taking it serious enough. I'm thinking they've been planning on doing this for a very long time. And they have all of their ducks in a row to make some things happen. And that's why they're doing it. Now, will they succeed in doing that? I'm not sure, but they have a lot of countries on board that's ready to roll. They had 11 countries. Then they added some more. They're adding 47 to 48 additional countries in their summit meeting coming up next month. Then they have 159 countries that are signed on to their BRICS bridge system, which is similar to SWIFT. So you're talking about 159 countries that's going to be added to the 47 that they're adding in October to go along with the 11 that they already had previously. That's getting pretty significant. And when you throw in countries like, of course, you got Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, part of the original BRICS. It used to just be BRIC without South Africa, but then they added South Africa. But now you throw in places like Saudi Arabia, and you throw in United Arab Emirates. Then things are becoming pretty significant as far as the cachet that they're going to have and the wealth that they're going to have that's going to be a part of this system. So in my opinion, I don't think they can be taken lightly. So I think we need to definitely take that seriously. So what that means to us, again, going back to the federal funds rate, eventually it will trickle over to us, but initially it's for the banks that do their overnight operations. And it's the federal funds rate to cut the banks as far as the interest rate loaning to one another. Now, this is the thing, guys. This is what you have to realize. When it comes to interest rate cuts, when our rates are at a certain percentage, it indicates a strong, powerful dollar. Each time we have to cut interest rates, it indicates a weak dollar. So although you may perceive interest rates to be good for us, and in a way it is, but then if you look at the back end of it, when you look at everything surrounding it, as far as things like the dollar and what that means to us as far as the power of our money, it decreases. Another thing you have to look at is when you cut interest rates, let's say, so we're going to cut the interest rates. We did it 50 basis points. Now the banks begin to cut interest rates to the customers or to the client. Let's say, for instance, banks begin to cut interest rates in reference to houses. So the houses, as far as the interest rates are concerned, as far as what the banks are giving right now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I would urge you to do your research on this. If I'm not mistaken, the rate is at, I want to say 8.5% right now. I believe it's at 8.5%. And I think it's been at 8.5% all year long as far as the prime rate is concerned. So if the banks begin to cut into that and lower that prime rate or lower the interest rate as far as what they're offering for homes, and you got to understand that that prime rate is for the most credit-worthy customers. It's almost like a benchmark to set. And so if they lower that prime rate in reference to the customers or the clients, then of course that's good. That means they can go out and maybe buy houses in more bulk, I guess you could say, or there will be more houses that are going to be bought because of that interest rate change, which is definitely a good thing. But this is what you have to look at, and this is what you have to be careful of. As I said before, economics is all cyclical. So if you cut that interest rate, houses get bought up, then what you're going to have is now you create a shortage of houses that are on the market because they're getting bought up at that interest rate. So now what you have is you have an increased demand without enough supply. So what's going to happen then? Well, if there's an increased demand without enough supply, then the prices are going to go up. That's the way it works. It's supply and demand. It's that simple. So that is what, if you remember from the last video, you have three types of inflation. You have demand pull inflation, you have cost push, and then you have built-in inflation. Demand pull inflation is what I'm talking about right now, because demand pull is when there's too much demand but not enough supply. And so when you have all of that demand, but there's not enough supply to meet the demand, then you're going to have what is called demand pull inflation. And so what ends up happening is, because of these rate drops and the buyers going up to buy up these homes, then now there's a shortage. Not as many homes on the market as it used to be, but the demand is still way high. So because the demand is short and the demand is way high, now there's going to be an increase in price, which is going to add to inflation. So there's got to be a fine balance there as far as the way things are handled. It's got to be handled delicately, if you will. So those are things you have to be careful of. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward in the future. If you want just kind of an idea of where we were, I was thinking about this, of where we were 5 years ago when it comes to the prime rate. Our prime rate 5 years ago, and I wanted to go back 5 years, a little bit before COVID, maybe in 2019. So 5 years ago, our prime rate was at, I want to say in January of that year, in 2019, it started at 5% and then increased to 5.5% by the end of that year in 2019. So it went from 5 to 5.5% in 2019. So that is way lower than it is now, because we're at 8.5% right now. It was at 8.5% in January, and the prime rate is 8.5% now. Now, maybe that will decrease now because of the federal funds rate change. So I would anticipate that decreasing. How low that prime rate is going to go, that I'm not sure of. But there are some tax experts here on YouTube that you could look towards that can maybe explain it a little bit better than I can. But that's just kind of like a quick rundown as far as the federal funds rate change and kind of my thinking of what will happen and what effect it will have going forward into the future. So I just wanted to talk about that a little bit and its effects on inflation. Well, some of you may think about a recession. Like, where are we as far as in reference to recessions? Well, to be honest with you guys, I already thought we were in a recession. I think we've been in a recession for over a year, in my opinion. And the reason I say that is because the definition of a recession is there are a couple of things. A recession has always been 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. And we've had that. Had that a long time ago. Going well into 2022, 2023. We've had 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. And I always thought we were already in a recession. But they say that we were not. And I don't know if there's some type of narrative that's trying to be pushed or whatever the case may be. But a recession has always been 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP. And we've had that a long time ago. Also, as well, another thing that goes into a recession that you have to look at is something that's called the SAM rule. The SAM rule, SAHM, the SAM rule, created by Claudia Sam. And the SAM rule basically tells us that the SAM rule is, it takes the 3-month moving average of of unemployment, if that percentage drops below half a percentage, or excuse me, increases to half a percentage or more within that 3-month moving average from its lowest point within a 12-month period, it indicates that a recession is on the way. Again, the SAM rule, SAHM, indicates that there's an increase of half a percentage point within a 3-month moving average of unemployment rate from its lowest point within a 12-month period, then a recession is on the way. Well, Brian, how accurate is this? Well, the SAM rule has indicated every recession accurately since 1970. Let me say that again. The SAM rule has indicated accurately every recession since 1970. That's pretty accurate. And so where are we now? So when the last unemployment totals came out not too long ago, we were at an increase of, it went from 3.7% to 4.3%. So that is 0.6. Now you're reading that it was 3.7 to 4.2. So that still indicates a recession. I don't know where that change came from. Maybe they went back and revamped some numbers. I don't know what happened. But initially, when those figures came out, the unemployment rate had increased from 3.7% to 4.3%. But now they're saying 3.7 to 4.2. Either way you look at it, it's 5 percentage points or over, which indicates that a recession is on the way. And the SAM rule has been accurate 100% since 1970. So there again, we have inflation. We have a low value of the dollar. We have a recession on the way. I'm going to just go ahead and say it's on the way, though they're going to tell you that it's not. We have a recession on the way. We have a system in BRICs that's being created. There's a lot of different intangibles going on right now with our economics. Well, what's the deal between Russia and China? Why are they so important in the midst of all of this? Just to kind of wrap this thing up. So Russia and China, as you know, are part of the BRICS system. They are friends, I guess I want to say, in war. And maybe I shouldn't say that, but they are very chummy. I remember back in May, I think it was May 21st of 2014. I remember when Russia and China signed a $300 to $400 million, it might be $1 billion, natural gas deal. And when they signed this deal, it really put a high alert on my brain. I just always felt that there was a deeper meaning behind that deal. It wasn't just Russia and China signing a deal for economic advantage, which of course that's part of it. I had a saying, I don't know. Let me see if I can pull it. See if I have it written down here. Let's see. Money and resources. Here it is. Thank God I wrote it down. Money and resources lead to wealth. Wealth leads to power. And most of the time, there is war involved. Let me say it again. Money and resources lead to wealth. Wealth leads to power. And most of the time, there is war involved. Make no mistake about it, guys. Anytime there's going to be some restructuring economically, anytime there's going to be another economic power to come into the forefront to take that number one spot, many of the times that does not happen without some type of war or conflict going on to reestablish power. It's happened time and time again in history, like clockwork. And I truly believe there is no difference here. When Russia and China signed the first part of the natural gas deal that was upward of $300 million, I believe it might be billion, $300 million or $1 billion natural gas deal in 2014. Right after Russia signed that deal, they invaded Ukraine for the first time and annexed Crimea. This was 2014. I was like, uh-oh, here we go. Then in February of 2022, Russia and China signed the second part of their natural gas deal. Same amount, $400 million or a billion, whichever one it was. But instead of it happening after Russia invaded Ukraine, I believe they signed this deal before Russia invaded Ukraine for the second time. Either way you look at it, Russia invaded Ukraine again, all around this natural gas deal for the second time, and them signing the second part of that natural gas deal, same amount of money, 300 to 400 million or $1 billion. Well, what are you trying to say, Braun? Well, I think it's very strange, and I don't think it's coincidental that around this natural gas deal that they signed, there was some type of invasion of the Ukraine. And remember what I said, money plus resources equals wealth. Wealth brings the power. And there is always war involved. Russia can bring up every excuse in the world as to why they invaded Ukraine. Vladimir Putin brought up some historical things as to why they did it during the Tucker Carlson interview. He brought up all of this historic fact as to why they wanted to invade Ukraine and why it was necessary to do so, based off of some historic fact. But it was deeper than that. Maybe a little percent of it was involving some historical fact or historical meaning. But make no bones about it, guys. A big part of him invading Ukraine was for the resources. The Ukraine is rich in resources. And what I mean by that, they're rich in uranium. They're rich in oil. They're rich in agriculture. It is a very rich land. And in my opinion, in order for Russia to fulfill their part of the deal with China, they needed additional resources. And to me, that's a big part of why they invaded Ukraine 2 times within the past 8 years. So if you go from 2014 to 2022, if you look in 2014 to 2024 right now, that's 10. So if you want to look at 10, that's fine. So they invaded Ukraine 2 times within 10 years. And all of it was involved around this natural gas deal. Now, I want to talk about this too as well. Now, you get the resources ready. with Russia and China being a big part of this BRICS system, now you can go and make your own currency and have your own economy outside of the United States. They don't even have to be involved a great deal. And I believe ultimately Russia and China wants to just totally get away from the United States. They want to get it totally away from the dollar. They want to totally get away as far as dependence on the United States monetary system in order to make their economy work. They want to do it within themselves where they don't have to depend on the United States or be sanctioned by the United States or be regulated by the United States in order to do business. And I think that's a big part of it. So now you get the resources, you got the power, you have the wealth. There's war involved where you get more resources. There's always this tension as far as in Taiwan, because there is this belief that China will invade Taiwan at some point. Taiwan being the richest place when it comes to semiconductors and computer chips. There is no place on earth like Taiwan when it comes to that. They are the leader in that category, which, as you know, when you look at semiconductors is the new oil. Data is the new oil. So that's very important. That's significant. And I believe all of it is involved around this BRICS system and that new monetary system. I just have that belief. I could be wrong. Maybe we'll come back here 10 years from now and there will be no workings of the sort when it comes to what I'm talking about right now. But I just believe that the reason they're trying to put all of this together is all surrounding their new monetary system, all surrounding their new economic system. What that means for the U.S., that I don't know. One thing I like about our situation is that we still have the most gold. We still have tons and tons of oil and a lot we hadn't even tapped into. So if we had the freedom to drill like we wanted to drill, I really do believe that would knock off a lot of our debt. That would get a lot of wealth circulating again. But then you do have to look at the climate things. So there's got to be a way that there could be some type of resolution to come about, maybe where you can do both. Maybe there'll be a safer, more climate friendly way of drilling in the future. Technology always increases. There are always better ways of doing things. And I would think that we have enough important economic minds in order to make it happen. So I guess we'll see what happens down the road. All right, guys, that's all I wanted to talk about tonight. I didn't even want to take up that much time, but I just wanted to just delve into that a little bit and kind of give you my thoughts on that. So it's been great talking to you guys again tonight. And we'll get into another video the next time. And hopefully I can bring you something good again. All right, guys, I hope you have a good night. It's been great spending this evening with you. And remember, always, always, always stay vigilant. Thank you.